Hi, I'm Erin Sarofsky.
And I'm Austin Shaw.
This is Between the Keyframes.
This week we're going to talk about W-2. Where'd my money go?
Okay, well, this is a two-part episode because there's really a lot to unpack here. So yes, W-2 this week, and then the next episode will be about 1099, the pros and cons of keeping all your money. But today is all going to be about the benefits of W-2. So I've basically only had full-time jobs, and you've had...
I've had
both.
Yes, both. But in at least in my commercial art, I've primarily been freelance.
So I think... And I'm also an employer of both freelancers and full-timers. So I could talk about it from a couple different perspectives, probably.
I know we have a little descriptor here, making the decision to take a full-time job versus being a freelancer, independent contractor is something almost all motion designers grapple with at some point in their careers. W-2 can give the illusion of security, and 1099 can give the illusion of freedom. So this episode will break down the real pros and cons. So,
I think that's such a fascinating way that we wrote this about. Because I think when people take a full-time job, there's this sense of security, which is ultimately an illusion, right? Because most employment is not contract-based, it's at will. So they can leave or be fired at any time for any reason, except for... obviously discrimination. Hopefully that's obvious. There's laws against that. And then 1099 gives you this illusion of freedom, but you still got to earn a living. And just because you go freelance doesn't mean everybody's going to be calling you to work with them. You still have to build a network. And in some ways you're, a business owner kind of.
And when you exercise that freedom, there's potentially stress of, have I made a prudent reserve so that I can take this vacation and not worry about that? Oh, I'm not earning money right now while I'm trying to enjoy this tropical beach.
Right, you're not getting paid to be there. Right. Where if you are on a W-2 and in a full-time job, you get paid vacation,
paid time off.
If you get hurt or sick, you have the flexibility to not work.
Right.
Let's kind of break it down. Let's start with talking about the benefits of being full-time. Cool. Okay, so
yeah, W-2. Why don't you tell us about that, since that is your experience. What are some of the biggest benefits of W-2 being a full-time employee? Yeah,
so you have access to healthcare. Ideally, if your employer doesn't give you access to healthcare, you should rethink that. But you have access to some kind of plan and policy, and hopefully your rates are a little lower because you're coming in as a group. So that's good. Ideally, hopefully in your package with your employer, they're going to take care of some of the costs. It's also pre-tax, I believe. Would have to check on that, but I believe that a lot of that is a pre-tax benefit. Yeah. Right. And that includes dental and vision, just depending on how big your studio is or company is. Typically the bigger a place is, the better the benefits are, because they have a larger group of people in. And
you get words like comprehensive, a comprehensive benefits package.
Yeah.
Right.
You get paid time off. Some people have vacation and sick time. You negotiate that when you're, taking a job. That's nice because the money is going to hit the account on the 1st and the 15th, no matter what. Ideally, you'd have some kind of access to, 401k, which you really should be doing no matter what. It's not hard to get linked into something, you know what I mean? So putting a percentage of your salary aside, but it's nice because again, it just comes out of your paycheck. And it's not something that you personally have to manage every month. So, and then, I don't know about a lot of studios, but certainly continuing education is a big thing. So if somebody wants to take a course or do something to go to a conference, usually
Right.
that's included. If you're a freelancer,
Right.
that's everything is on you. Like if you want to do that, you got to take the time off to go, you got to pay to get there, you got to pay for your hotel, you got to pay for the tickets. Like those things
Right.
get to be pretty pricey.
Right on. And those are some real like concrete, pragmatic benefits.
Right.
What about some of the less explicit benefits?
Yeah, so when you, especially if you're younger or earlier out in your career, mentorship is huge. Like you come in and, that studio or company knows that they're going to be investing in you, in teaching you, and really just kind of growing you as both like an artist and a person. There's going to be a lot of development there. So if you come in, I think as a freelancer, we're kind of expecting to get some major bang for our buck there. And there's not going to be that much flexibility in terms of how much you're actually producing. For our studio, I know we have like a mix of projects. We like to make sure that our full-timers have access to the real good, juicy, creative stuff,
Right.
So yeah, that's a big deal, making sure they're creatively fulfilled. Like them being happy is a big part of the studio being happy. So making sure they have a diversity of work and
Right.
good work.
I mean, and that sort of implies that idea of a career trajectory, right? That as a full-time staff, that you're working towards advancement potentially. What about digging into some of that job security though? What is what's the illusion of the job security? Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the illusion is that there really isn't job security at any time. Like just because you're full-time doesn't mean that for whatever reason there might be a turn in the work and the work is not there, and no employer is going to keep all their staff on if the work just isn't there, right? Or if anything happens with the studio or the company, like if the numbers aren't there, that's why you see like bigger studios and companies have like layoffs, like mass layoffs, because they got the numbers in and they weren't good, and now they gotta switch it up for Q1 of the next year. So you see that happen, and it's like really unfortunate, but it's part of just the business of business. If the work's not there, somebody's got to go, and it likely has absolutely nothing to do with them and how they're performing. It could be that the style of work is changing, or the trajectory of the company has changed, and like that thing that you do well there is no longer really necessary or not something they're pursuing. There can be lots of reasons for it.
Right. Or mismanagement at the top.
Big time. We've seen that a lot in our career. Me and you, just looking back, we met in the early 2000s, and we've seen...
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's been rise and falls
of the greatest
studios.
Companies. Yeah, great studios. Like, a studio might get acquired. And once a studio is acquired, like, anything can happen. Nobody's job is safe. Like, no one, nowhere. So... they might decide to relocate a whole studio or just close that office because that office is underperforming, or, there could be a partnership dispute and the company breaks apart or just goes away. Like there's all sorts of crazy things that we've seen happen, which is why like a full-time job is absolutely an illusion.
Right.
Yeah.
The American dream.
I mean, there's security in knowing where your next paycheck is going to come from, and certainly,
and also just knowing your schedule, knowing where you're going, knowing where you are supposed to be on Monday morning at 10 a.m., right?
Yeah. And there's certainly more security. Right. And there's more security than being a freelancer, where every day you're booking with a new studio, or every week, or you do month-long bookings, or however like that arrangement is. Like the whole point is you're not necessarily being uprooted and being put into a new structure every time. So there's more security than that. But like this bigger illusion that if I have a W-2, if I'm full-time somewhere, that this is where I'm going to be until I decide otherwise is just not the case.
I'd say another one of those more abstract benefits is probably culture, right? Being a part of a culture, being like you talked about that idea of being rooted in a culture.
Yeah.
And just feeling that feeling of belonging
Family,
or being connected to, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're part of something.
Right. So like there's this like common goal or mission or something that you all believe in together. And that's like a best case scenario. In my experience, like company cultures change obviously per place, but even over time, like even my studio, the company culture has shifted and changed over the 10 years that I've owned it. You know, it feels like when I look back, like it was like 4 different companies at this point.
Right. How would you describe them if you were to just give quick snapshots? What are those four different iterations look like?
Yeah, well, when we started, it was like really just me trying to figure it out, trying to get work, making clients happy, leaning on relationships I had with freelancers that were friends. There was this like, we're going to build this amazing kind of thing. And then another big shift happened like when we landed Marvel and moved into our big fancy office space. That was like a very big pivotal moment. It's like we really grew up. A lot of, you know, after a couple of years of doing work like that, then there was another shift. And that shift wasn't necessarily good because once you have the stress of that kind of intense work and those kind of billings and keeping the numbers going, and that many mouths to feed, like, and families and all the thing, like you start to see cracks in what you thought was like this great, amazing thing. And then it becomes about slowly repairing them, identifying them and repairing them. And that took time. And I feel like we're now on the other side of that, where here we are, a new company. And you could argue that there's a mini new company during the pandemic because there's a whole infrastructure change and blah, 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 blah. But I feel like, you know, we've had our ups and downs company culture wise and change wise. And I feel like we're in a really good place now. But every company goes through that. When I was at DK, my God, it was like, especially with the changes in creative directors, especially in the Chicago office, it was bananas. Everything changed so much. What do they call it?
A revolving door?
Yeah, and like, you know, all of them had their pros and cons, but their impact on the culture, speaking about it from a culture perspective, was different. And then you have to acknowledge that you as a full-timer are part of that culture. So if you're a negative Nelly, guess what? You're like poison to the company culture.
Gotta check yourself.
Yeah, you gotta check yourself. You gotta know that you have impact on this place outside of just the work.
And what about some of the cons of the W-2? What would you describe those as?
Yeah, some things we've seen, of course, all of these we've seen. The cons of being full-time are probably that I think it's like this grass is greener idea, that this is always this kind of, if you're a person that has this kind of urge to go and explore or think that things are better somewhere else, like that can, after a couple years, start grating on somebody. Definitely seen that, where it's like, oh, I want to go, but I have this secure thing, but I want to go, but I have this secure thing and I like the people and I like the work. So there's definitely like this grass is greener. And just change, like people needing change, but not necessarily realizing it's their career because
sometimes it's the nest gets too comfortable, but maybe they've outgrown the nest or it's just not the right nest anymore.
Or they just need change. I think like there's like this 4-year cycle like that we go through, and then we go to a new school and we meet new friends, and then when there's 4 years later we got a new thing and a new school and and so then you go out into the world, and I think there's something that starts happening after that amount of time that you have to just mentally or emotionally address, you know, and if you feel like you haven't leveled up at that place, one, there's probably a reason why. Right. And then 2, if you feel like you have, but they're not leveling you up, you have to leave. You got to move on. You have to take ownership over your own career and not let management kind of do that for you. So.
Gotcha.
More things is just personally going stagnant. If it's the same work on the same, especially if you do a lot of the same work on the same brand, you know, years and years of that could make you go crazy. So And also, like, if nobody is challenging you around you and you've gotten your skills to a certain point and you're at the top of your game, but you don't have access to work to push you even further, or you feel like you don't have the resources, you got to move on, because you got to be growing and learning, I think.
And what about the idea of being stuck in a role or being kind of like the perception is imprinted if you start as a junior person? Sometimes, I mean, ideally a studio is going to help groom you and promote you, but sometimes they can never stop seeing you as just that junior person. And even if you're winning all the jobs and you're leading the projects, you're not maybe getting the raise or the title. Exactly.
Or you're just really good at what you do, and moving somebody that's an amazing animator, artist, or producer into a management role to, like, from a supervisor perspective, like, so in that situation, you're losing an amazing animator and gaining a junior leader. And if you're willing to make that transition, it's very fair that the company is like, yeah, but you're really good at this thing. And so you might have to decide, like, it's no, I want to do that, so I'm going to move on and do that somewhere else. You know what I mean? Very hard to kind of change things up on somebody's career. And we've done that. We've promoted people into management roles, and it wasn't suited for them. And then, like, there's no going back once you level somebody up, and then it gets really bad. It's like not an ideal fit for that person or for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I had a couple topics popped in my head, like sustainability and then also rigidity versus flexibility. And I think I don't know, I feel like they're all related
Absolutely.
in a way, right? And everyone, everyone's got varying degrees of rigidity in certain areas versus their ability to kind of adapt and change.
Yeah.
Right.
But to your point, like, also, if you come in really young, some companies have the ability to evolve and to see you evolve and to, like, have pride in that they've grown this intern into this amazing ECD. And some companies just can't. Sometimes management just can't see that younger person evolve.
Right.
Like
and sometimes they have to make the move.
They got to make a move.
Want the promotion? Make the move.
And, like, some studios do it pretty quickly with people, but I personally believe that experience and just time doing the work is an essential part of the mastery of it. So just because you are a great art director and you do have a good eye and you do have good feedback does not mean that you necessarily are creative director material yet.
Because talent does not equal experience. Exactly, right. And then it's interesting, I think experience probably some of that, the ability to adapt and to be flexible when needed, a lot of that does come from experience of having gone through, that's a major curveball. Like, how do we fix this, right?
Yeah.
Like, here comes a huge change from a project. How do I
address this
and not freak out?
Absolutely. And if you're dealing with a client, you got to know how to help them through that kind of a process, and how to predict it, how to help them through it, how to guide your team. I mean, that just comes with experience, like the confidence to be able to go through it and not freak out on every single note. And then on the other side, as an animator, you should, if you've had experience, you've set up your file in a way that can accommodate most crazy shit that a client will say.
Just like, or you can accurately assess, like, that's not realistic. Like, we're going to need X amount of time to get this actually done.
Yeah. And, providing an option that you think is probably more what they're asking for, even if they're asking for this other thing. Or you and your team decide that. You're like, actually, I'm going to build it also this way so that we can see this coming, So it's interesting when you think about it from this perspective, just like Skyview being full-time versus freelance,
Right. This was fun.
Let's do it again in 2 weeks.
Hope your day is easy ease. E.